Welcome, everybody. I hope everybody's having a lovely day so far. My name is Darshan Karawat, and I am an assistant professor at Arizona State University. But more importantly, for the purposes of this afternoon, I am the chair of the board for SkyTruth. I am an aerospace engineer by training, and many years ago, as a student at the University of Michigan, I was passionate about trying to combine how I care about aerospace engineering with my love for environmental protection. Fast forward to 2013, and I attended a talk on a whim at the World Wildlife Federation. And there I met John, who gave a talk on an organization that he started many years prior on how he was using the view from space to think about, care about the environment differently. And as soon as I saw the talk, I felt so strongly how this organization, SkyTruth, is an instantiation of the kinds of things that I cared about. And in fact, the first organization that I had heard of that cared so deeply about environmental protection because of our ability to go to space. What you're going to experience today is just a snippet of the wonderful work that SkyTruth has been doing over many, many, many years. I'd like you to pay attention to how cutting edge the work they're doing is. With that, I will pass it over to the president and CEO of John, who'll take it away.
Thank you, Darshan, and it's been just such a great pleasure to have you join our board of directors, and I'm just really excited at the contributions that you've made to SkyTruth as we've entered our next phase of growth and accomplishment. Well, hello, joining us. As Darshan said, I'm John Amos. I'm the founder and president of SkyTruth. I started SkyTruth 20 years ago with a very simple mission: to share the view from space to promote conservation for the benefit of people and the planet. And in the 20 years that have followed, that mission remains unchanged. But what has changed considerably is the technology that we put in space and the technology we've developed on the ground to handle huge volumes of data. And just by way of comparison, 20 years ago, a very common problem that we had at SkyTruth was there was no imagery available to illustrate the environmental incident that had just occurred or the environmental issues that we were trying to communicate about. And that's because there were so few Earth-observing satellites in orbit, just a few dozen that were accessible to the public, operated by a handful of governments and private companies. Well, fast forward to today, now there are thousands of Earth-observing satellites in orbit, collecting tens of thousands of satellite images from around the Earth every day, operated by dozens of countries around the world that are jumping into the space race, and by new startup companies that are jumping into the space business. Just one of these companies, Planet, and you'll see some of their work later on in the presentation, has hundreds of Earth-observing satellites in orbit now. And when they launch them by the dozen. So this is a very exciting time, but now we have a very different problem than what we had 20 years ago. Now the problem is, of the 10,000 new satellite images of Earth that came down from orbit today, which ones do I want to look at? Which ones contain information that I care about? It's a daunting challenge. And that's why, if you've been following SkyTruth, you probably recall that in early 2019, we launched a new initiative that we call Conservation Vision. And it's our initiative to apply big data technologies and artificial intelligence to the problem of scanning these thousands of new images every day to extract information that's useful for conservation, and do that in a seamlessly automated way that magnifies the power and reach of our staff based in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, to routinely cover the environment everywhere on planet Earth. And we've made quite a lot of progress on that conservation vision initiative. And in a minute, I'm going to hand it over to some of our team members. We're going to talk to you about the specific projects that they're doing that are part of this initiative, how they're using machine learning and other forms of automation to magnify our reach and impact. But first, a little bit of housekeeping. This is an open Zoom session. We would ask that all of you keep your video turned off and keep yourself muted. If you're not familiar with Zoom, just hover your cursor down near the bottom of the screen and a row of icons will emerge. One looks like a monitor. Make sure it's got a little slash mark through it. One looks like a microphone. Please do the same and keep yourself muted and turned off throughout the session. We're also going to have a question and answer session at the end of the presentations, but at any time, you can type your question into the chat. And again, you'll see the chat icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So please do that. And Amy will be moderating questions at the end. And finally, just one note, we are recording this session so that we can put it on our website, and people who couldn't join us now at this time will be able to watch it at their convenience. Okay, that takes care of the business. Let's get on with the show. With that, I'd like to turn things over to our geospatial engineer, Christian Thomas, who's going to tell you about the work he's been doing to map the impacts of mountaintop mining, and in a very exciting new phase of the project, measuring the recovery of landscape after mining activity has stopped. Christian?
Great. Yeah, thanks a lot, John. And good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Tonight, I'll be starting with an overview of our work mapping mountaintop mining in Appalachia. And then I'm going to be covering some of the work that we've done this year that goes beyond just identifying where these mines are and begins to address the ecological legacy that they have. And then from there, we'll have a little bit about what to keep an eye out for in 2022. So next slide, please. In 2018, we released our first yearly mining data set that shows the extent of surface mining throughout Appalachia at an annual interval dating back to 1985. And since that original publication, it's been cited over 70 times by other scientific and peer-reviewed studies and has been viewed over 11,000 times. And with each subsequent study, we have a better understanding of the many ways that surface mining affects both public health and also degrades surrounding ecosystems. Earlier this week, we published our annual update to the data set, where we found that 34 square kilometers of land were newly destroyed in 2020 by mountaintop removal mining. Next slide, please. Back one slide, please. Yeah. So here we're seeing 35 years of Landsat imagery showing the expansion of the Hobet 21 mine, which is located southwest of Charleston, West Virginia. And as we've been seeing since 2008, coal production in Appalachia is on the decline. Each year, the amount of land being mined decreases. And as we transition into this new era, the most pressing question that's facing states and local communities is what happens to the land after the end of mining. The key driver for our new work is a need for transparency in the landscape recovery efforts. As a part of mining processes, operators are required to set aside bond money, which is to be used to reclaim any land that's been disturbed by mining. Half of the coal in the country is mined by companies that have recently gone bankrupt, and many coal companies also use the bankruptcy process to evade land restoration efforts. Concerningly, a 2017 audit found that the West Virginia State Managed Reclamation Fund, their bonding may actually be insufficient to guarantee the continuation of the program if operators fail in their required restoration. And in those instances where reclamation efforts fall short, if bonds are released, it's states and local communities who will be on the hook for any further work needed to restore mined lands. Next slide, please. In May of this year, working with our partners at Appalachian Voices, we released the Central Appalachian Mine Reforestation Assessment Report and Data, which is the first comprehensive assessment of mine land recovery across the region. The data set and the associated web map allow citizens and regulators to examine the ecological conditions of a site in comparison to healthy forests. And this work creates vital transparency in a process of bond release and landscape recovery. Earlier this year, or I guess in November, so not that much earlier, we worked with our partners at Defenders of Wildlife to publish new research that links mountaintop removal mining to the degradation of water quality in Appalachian rivers and streams that are home to endangered species, such as the diamond darter, which is pictured here in the bottom, and the The key finding of this paper was that thresholds for toxic materials were exceeded thousands of times since 1985 in streams across the region. And this research represents the next step in linking the practice of surface mining to its true impact on surrounding ecosystems, and will hopefully lead to stricter permitting for new or expanded mine operations. We're currently working with researchers at Appalachian Voices, the University of Nevada, and Colorado State University to expand our mineland recovery analysis to gain a more nuanced understanding of how these areas recover, as well as the factors that contribute to their recovery. So be sure to keep an eye out for that, hopefully early next year. And with that, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Bjorn Bergman.
Thanks very much, Christian. I'm going to be talking about Project Inambari, which is a set of tools for monitoring mining in tropical forests. Next slide, please. So unregulated gold mining has been particularly devastating throughout the Amazon basin, as you can see from these two news articles from Venezuela and Peru. Next slide, please. Project Inambari won funding last year from the Artisanal Mining Challenge, sponsored by Conservation X Labs. And this year we've gotten some additional support to do field testing in the Amazon. So you can see our project on the lower left here, along with our field testing partner, CERNAP, the Peruvian Park Service. Next slide. I'm currently in Puerto Maldonado, Peru. This is the dot in the southern part of this map. This is a remote location near the Bolivian and Brazilian borders, where there's a lot of unregulated mining. And it's been possible to make 2 trips out into the field with the Peruvian Park Service, which I'm going to talk about here. Next slide. So our first trip was to the Amaricari Communal Reserve. This is a remote park area, a little larger than Rhode Island. So the whole area is monitored by just about 20 park staff, and they have 4 control posts. So we're there in front of one of the posts. We also brought a mapping drone out to the location. Next slide. Here we're getting breakfast with the park rangers. Next slide. This park is best known for this stone head discovered just a few years ago, and for some other little understood archaeological sites. Next slide. However, the entire park area is essentially under siege from unregulated mining, like this operation, which we took a picture of just a short distance away from park boundaries. Next slide. So this is what you can see on our monitoring map. So the park boundaries are actually just south of the river you see going through here. And then some mining activity was occurring just a few hundred meters north of this boundary. Those are outlined in red. And then you can also see one of the areas which we mapped with the drone. And so we have very high resolution imagery of that region. Next slide. Christian, who you just heard from, is also working on a machine learning model to specifically detect mining areas. So these are some of his results displayed over a satellite image where you can see some of the main mining areas in the region. So over on the right-hand side of the image is an area called La Pampa, which was the second area that we made a trip out to. Next slide. So this is some footage that was captured within the Tambopata Reserve. This is a area of the park that was invaded by miners several years ago, and they're working on restoring it. So they're launching the mapping drone. This is a fixed wing vertical takeoff drone, which can cover a quite large area. And it's a really interesting resource to work with because it gives us some high resolution imagery to compare with our satellite sources. And here you can see the landscape after a few years of mining recovery, but still very much impacted by previous mining. All right, go on to the next slide. And just to finish off, a few of you may have seen some articles about hundreds of gold mining dredges in the Amazon. Next slide. In fact, these can be seen very well on our alerts mapping platform, particularly with some radar imagery. You see a radar composite image on the right-hand side with those lines along the riverbank being dozens of dredges. And this is just one of many new sources that Dan is adding to the map. So we're looking forward to working with these. So very happy to now hand this off to Dan Cogswell, who has designed our mapping interface. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Bjorn. So Bjorn's been a big help to me this year by promoting alerts to the groups he works with in Peru. And one of my last slides will show the results of the drone flyover you just saw in Bjorn's presentation. Next, please. I'll be talking about what's going on with alerts in 2021. If you're not familiar with alerts, it's a program that shows you where environmental incidents have occurred. Most, but not all of the incidents are associated with the oil and gas industry. Anyone can subscribe to alerts for their areas of interest and receive emails when new incidents are found. And they can do this for free. Next, please. Alerts had over 9,600 unique visitors from all over the world in 2021. The average visitor stayed for over 4 minutes, up almost a minute from last year. This year saw users starting to do more than just view incidents. They started using the available imagery and data sets, and some even created their own maps, such as, next, maps that show a particular chemical release into the air or water, centered over an area they care about. Next. Or this map of the Huntington Beach spill, which combines a radar satellite image of the spill with pipelines and platforms. This map was then annotated to identify the slick boundary and the known vessels in the area. So these types of maps can be created by anyone using alerts, but this particular one was created by John and even ended up on the CBS News when he was interviewed by them about the spill. This made my 89-year-old mom proud that I work at SkyTruth. She doesn't understand any of it, but she was still proud. Next, please. We've curated about 50 of the best of these maps and have made them freely available via a public maps link. Next. So John's original vision for a new alerts program, it was originally for a program to provide satellite imagery and mapping tools to activists, citizen scientists, and volunteers who are monitoring their own areas. These aren't researchers and scientists, but people who don't have the background or skills to access satellite imagery on their own. In other words, most of our family, friends, and neighbors. So, for example, on this map, the user accessed imagery to delineate the area in his development that is set aside as grassland birds habitat. He can easily revisit the area to view new images and monitor for new woody growth. But this is pretty small scale. Next. You're probably familiar with the 30 by 30 initiative. 30% of the planet to be sustainably managed by 2030. That's about 730 million acres in the US alone. Who will monitor this? And how will they do it? The work we've done in 2021 positions SkyTruth Alerts to be a practical tool in this effort. Next, please. So I made probably a dozen major enhancements to alerts this year and over 100 smaller ones. If I were to highlight just one improvement, it would be the addition of imagery from Planet Labs. Planet Labs is a satellite company that takes a picture of the entire Earth every day. Our enhancement started with Norway's International Climate and Forest Initiative, or NICFI, when they announced that they were making Planet's monthly base maps of tropical countries available free to those working on environmental issues. Planet's base maps combine the best daily images for a month into one composite image. It offers a higher resolution than what was previously available in alerts, so you can see a lot more detail. And since it's cloud-free, it's perfect for spotting changes from one month to another. Even more exciting to me is that Planet Labs is now allowing us to offer their catalog of daily images inside of alerts. So give me a location and a date, and alerts can show you a picture of that area taken from 295 miles above the Earth. Next, please. In 2021, alerts started being deployed as a front end for other SkyTruth projects. This has a potential to save a huge amount of resources because we don't have to create a separate web application now for every project. Here's the public-facing map for John Raphael's Cerulean project. In this view, you're seeing a specific slick as a result of bilge dumping at sea. You're also seeing the radar satellite image that John's machine learning model discovered it on. You'll hear more about this from John in a few minutes. Next slide. And here's a map to hold Bjorn's work in Peru with Project Inambari. This view shows a close-up image that was a result of the drone flight you saw earlier in Bjorn's presentation. And my last slide, please. And that is my very quick alerts year in review. And next up, Brendan will tell us about his work with harmful algae blooms. Brendan is a geospatial analyst here at SkyTruth.
Thanks so much, Dan. Hi, everyone. I'm Brendan, like he said, and today I'm going to be talking to you about our work with harmful algal blooms, as well as a little bonus at the end about our internship program. Next slide, please. When you think of harmful algal blooms, what comes to mind? Perhaps the red tide off the coast of Miami. Maybe the blooms that plague Lake Erie in the northern US. Whatever you think of, one thing is for certain. HABS, as they're often referred to, are a challenging hazard to our planet's battle against climate change. A byproduct of nutrient runoff, warming waters, and low flow rates, HABS are quickly becoming a prevalent indicator of human-related impact on the natural environment. Once exposed to a harmful algal bloom, humans and other animals can be sickened or potentially die off from the toxic cocktail of chemicals housed in these algae cells. The issue is quickly becoming a routine occurrence in some of our most precious freshwater and transitional water bodies. One researcher, Dr. Joe Ortiz at Kent State University, who we're happy to have on this call tonight, is attempting to mitigate this trend using satellite imagery. SkyTruth is proud to have been working alongside his lab since 2019 to expand their methodology for harmful algal bloom detection. While other workflows have been developed by other groups like NOAA, Dr. Ortiz's method is said to offer one significant advantage: specificity. Next slide, please. While other common surveillance algorithms group a lot of unique components into one generalized classification, Dr. Ortiz's method can detect different types and intensities of algae in these images. In this image, the colorful palette applied to the visible water bodies shows the output of this workflow. While Dr. Ortiz's algorithm is quickly gaining traction as a viable method for HAB detection, it has previously faced a major hurdle in the form of scalability. The proprietary software Dr. Ortiz had traditionally used required downloading and processing individual images. SkyTruth took his algorithm and translated it to function in Google Earth Engine. This breakthrough allows for processing of thousands of satellite images on the cloud. No more downloading and relying on the power of your local machine. Now you can whip up a processed image in minutes, making near real-time implementation of Dr. Ortiz's algorithm a distinct possibility. Next slide, please. SkyTruth's next phase of collaboration with Kent State is looking to make this possibility a reality. Work is underway to automate this Earth Engine process in the Google Cloud platform. Not only will the added benefits of processing an Earth Engine be leveraged, But now the KSU team will be able to analyze images they didn't even have to hit the go button on. Less time can be spent messing with code, and more time can be spent on the next step, developing a one-stop shop where concerned parties can access information on when and where HABs are breaking out in their communities in real time. Publicly launching this workflow would be a huge leap forward, leading in turn to action against the drivers of HAB growth around the world. Next slide, please. Aside from the HAB automation work, I've spent a significant amount of time in the last year ideating new ways to generate interest in the SkyTruth internship program. We took the internship fully virtual in 2020, and that trend continued in 2021. It's a great thing to be able to have interns working with us who are from near and far, but I'm not content with settling with students coming to us. That's why I've begun an outreach campaign designed to reinvigorate the SkyTruth brand in the minds of young students who are motivated to use their skills to protect the environment. In order to do this, I've begun to attend career fairs, class seminars, and virtual events to meet students where they are. This gets the SkyTruth name out there, getting our foot in the door at universities that we previously haven't received a lot of attention from. Our interns are absolutely critical to the success of our company, and I'm honored to be the director of the next phase of this program. I'm done, and with that, I'll pass it on to Dr. Rye Covington, who is going to speak to you about his awesome work in the Colorado River Basin.
Thanks, Brendan. Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Covington, SkyTruth's Technical Program Director, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about a project that we're calling Verdant, our effort to teach computers how to automatically map land use, land cover, and land cover change. Next slide, please. This is an image from the Colorado River Basin, perhaps the most stressed and over-allocated river in the US. Some 400 million people rely on the Colorado, and it's drying up fast. In fact, earlier this year, federal officials declared an emergency water shortage on the river for the first time ever. The Colorado's flow has already declined by nearly 20% on average from its flow throughout the 1900s, and this is really only expected to get worse. It's an uncomfortable new reality. One of the country's most important sources of fresh water in peril, another victim of the accelerating climate crisis. One of the compounding threats, though, is the spread of non-native trees. This is a restoration crew removing tamarisk, a non-native tree species that outcompetes with native vegetation. It grows fast and forms thick stands that lower the water table and increase wildfire frequency in a region already pushed to the brink by drought. Worse, these species are notoriously difficult to eliminate, and despite enormous, expensive efforts to remove them and restore native vegetation, the sheer size of the problem and the remoteness of many stretches of the river has made it difficult to assess where the problem is intensifying the fastest and which techniques are working in which places and why. Next slide, please. So, building from the mountaintop mining work that Christian talked about a bit earlier, we've used the Landsat archive to develop a 35-year data set of vegetation trends in the Colorado Basin, stretching from 1985 to 2020. This is an example from the Verde River in Arizona, a tributary of the Colorado, and it shows the trend in vegetation coverage and health for every single 30-meter Landsat pixel. In this example, the pixels shown in deep orange are areas that have experienced statistically significant vegetation declines over the last 35 years. And the pixels shown in deep blue are areas that have experienced the opposite, statistically significant vegetation increases over the same time period. Next slide, please. The real question, though, if we're honest, is whether those vegetation gains are invasives, like tamarisk, that lower the water table and increase the prevalence of wildfires, or if they're natives, that add wildlife habitat, improve water quality, and help to restore some semblance of balance to riparian areas. And this is essential information for our restoration partners that are working on the ground in these watersheds. As I mentioned, these are remote, difficult to reach stretches of the river. And getting a restoration crew out there to remove tamarisk, Russian olive, and other invasives is a pretty enormous undertaking, especially for small watershed groups with limited time, capacity, and resources. So we're using SkyTruth alerts, which Dan has mentioned, and a new partnership with another conservation technology organization called the Commons to bring these advanced analytics to watershed users where they need them, improving their ability to identify areas that they want to prioritize for restoration. And using the tools that we're building with the Commons, watershed groups can now more effectively and efficiently monitor and manage these huge landscapes that they steward. Next slide, please. One of the features that I'm most excited about coming up in 2020 is using daily satellite imagery from Planet Labs to map and track, land use and land cover, and to identify areas of kind of suspect land cover change in the Colorado Basin in near real time. This is an example from just outside of Las Vegas in southern Nevada, where we've compared monthly satellite image composites from Planet Labs to identify just over 6 acres of newly installed industrial scale solar panels. And this is really kind of the vision that we have for Verdant, a machine learning powered land use change detection platform, where we can apply it not just in the Colorado River Basin, but to protected areas all over the globe that are important for restoring the habitat that is essential for biodiversity and for minimizing and mitigating a changing climate, the impact really of a changing climate. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Jana Raphael, who is going to tell you a little bit more about the machine learning tools that our team has developed and how he is deploying them at sea to protect the oceans. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Rai. Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan Raphael, a machine learning engineer, and I'm here to share with you today what 2021 held in store for Cerulean. Next slide, please. In addition to all the other skills you've seen showcased tonight, over the past 2 decades, SkyTruth has amassed a world-class understanding of oil pollution at sea, from large-scale events like Deepwater Horizon to persistent leaks like the Taylor energy spill, and even to hundreds of individual ships dumping oil overboard daily. These death by 1,000 cuts pollution events from tankers and cargo ships can each release thousands of gallons of oil that suffocates sea life and washes ashore, leading to economic and environmental disasters like this one in Brazil, or the one in Israel earlier this year, which the Nature and Parks Authority described as the worst natural disaster in years. Next. For years now, SkyTruth has regularly downloaded satellite imagery, like the black and white radar image shown here, and manually reviewed each scene. Here we see the gray textured ocean encircling some islands in Indonesia. Our analyst team would look for ships traveling at sea, which, because they are bulky metal reflectors on a relatively smooth surface, stand out as bright white specks, and you can see a few at the top and bottom of the picture. Most importantly, however, are those that can be seen actively discharging the telltale black streak of an oil slick. We then overlay a second data set from the automatic identification system, which are a series of location beacons that large ships are required to emit for safety every few minutes in order to find a compelling match between the oil slick and the vessels in the area. Here we see a handful of broadcasts from one vessel that tracks very well when we account for the fact that currents may cause an oil spill on the surface to stretch and distort a little bit. This human-mediated process is effective, but costly, and not to mention tedious, and it's impractical to scale up as more and more satellite data becomes available for analysis. So in 2021, we brought the modern art of deep learning neural networks to bear on the subject, leveraging our team's expertise we trained a computer to sift through hundreds of thousands of satellite images just like this one. And what the algorithm revealed surprised even us. Next. In the past year alone, we have documented over 7 times the volume of the Exxon Valdez oil spill being released in the form of vessel pollution. The machine learning model identified over 100 vessel slicks each month, giving us a better feel for the true scale and distribution of the problem. In addition to geographic insights, like the hotspot analysis shown here, Indonesia is the worst victim by far, we also positively identified 153 of the culprits using AIS and identifying their vessel at the scene of the crime. This further enabled us to learn trends like what type of ships pollute the most. 56% are tankers, 30% carry cargo. And who's doing the most polluting? Russian vessels, followed closely by Panamanians. Now we are actively looking for groups and organizations that care about this issue enough to bring it to light. We're in conversations with, among others, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, who want to reduce their overhead that their team of analysts bury each day as they look through their own stack of satellite images, as well as an international coalition of investigative journalists that is centering our dataset in an upcoming expose on vessel pollution in European waters. And even the US Coast Guard, who took the time to investigate one of the slicks that we flagged them in US waters. Next. Finally, while reviewing the results of our machine learning model, we realized that it had inadvertently been identifying some oil spills from stationary sources, like leaky offshore oil rigs or seeps in the ocean floor. We are now working on a new technique wherein we overlay a collection of machine learning analyses from a single geographic location. As the tides and currents change from day to day, the oil sheen on the surface will trail out in different directions, creating a pinwheel pattern centered on the source. That allows us to start to visualize the scope of the problem and pinpoint the source of the pollution. For instance, these 4 troublesome platforms off the coast of Trinidad and Tobago. This is one of our leading interests as we look to next year. We're planning to formally bring infrastructure analysis into our machine learning pipeline, as well as planning to run the algorithm, both for vessels and infrastructure, on a huge historic database holding satellite imagery over the past 7 years to better understand these trends and the way this challenge has changed over time. Thanks for your attention. Please feel free to add any more questions you have to the chat, and now I'll pass it back to John, who will wrap us up.
Wow, thank you guys. You know, I run SkyTruth, but I always learn something new when the team is presenting the work that they're doing. And one thing that might strike you all is, wow, what a diverse range of projects and issues the SkyTruth team is addressing. What holds it all together? And what all of these projects have in common is they all demonstrate SkyTruth innovation in the use of advanced data management and data analysis technologies and techniques to provide new value and new information for conservation. And the other common thread is that the solutions that we're developing are being built not just to solve one conservation problem in one specific location, but they're built to be applicable anywhere on the planet. And that will allow governments, scientific researchers, conservation advocates, even concerned citizen watchdogs to continuously monitor and take action to protect the places that they care about anywhere on the planet at any time. That is our vision. And I'm really thrilled to announce that just days ago, we got word from a funder that they had approved a major grant from us that will support a large part of SkyTruth's operation for the next 3 years. And it lays an extremely strong foundation for us to begin to grow the SkyTruth team and add to the capacity and the impact of the very talented team that you've just gotten a glimpse of today. So we're thrilled about what's ahead in 2022 and beyond. I must point out, though, as generous as this funding announcement was that we received, it doesn't cover everything. And I know that many of you have supported SkyTruth for years with your donations, and that support is and will continue to be extremely important to us. One, to be able to demonstrate that we have a community of people who are invested in the work that we're doing. And that will help us as we go out to recruit top talent from the technical world to come and join our team. But also because your donations and support give us flexibility, freedom to innovate, freedom to take some risks and do some experiments as we learn how to use and apply these new technologies, freedom to fail on a regular basis, which is really important for us to be able to learn and make progress. And also your support is really important for us to grow the outstanding internship program that Brendan is leading. And so I would encourage you, if you're interested, go to skytruth.org/donate to see how you can help, or feel free to send an email to hello@skytruth.org, and we will answer your questions. Speaking of questions, I think I'm going to turn it over now to Amy. I see we've got some questions in the chat. It's not too late to add yours. And Amy Matthews, our writer-editor, will help monitor or moderate and feed questions to our team. Team, I'm going to ask you all to turn on your video so everybody can see you again. And Amy, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, John. We've got a question here from Dr. Joe Ortiz, and I think this goes to Bjorn. It relates to Project Inambari, and he asks whether you can estimate the amount of turbidity increase in the river due to the mining activity. So Bjorn, I'm wondering if you can elaborate a bit on what Project Inambari can detect, whether it's through the satellite imagery or the drone imagery, and what information it can share with others that can help address this problem.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And sorry about my video. For some reason, I'm not able to turn it on at the moment. But I was actually just discussing the question of looking at turbidity from mining sites. And it is something that's quite clear on within Project Inambari and our mapping platform. And in fact, one thing that has been quite interesting is that Dan has recently added spectral indices, things like NDVI, which make it even clearer, at least for me, when I'm looking at making the comparison between a river that's coming from a mining area where there's high turbidity and a river that's coming from out of, say, one of the protected park areas. And so currently on the alerts platform, which is what Project Inambari is running on, there's a number of different sources of satellite-derived deforestation alerts. And then there's also this a mining-specific alert, which Christian continues to work on, and we hope to add to the platform in the future. And then also this whole range of different satellite imagery and spectral indices calculations from those. So we have Landsat, Sentinel 1 and 2, which are European systems for radar and optical imagery, and then also the high resolution planet images, which Dan was showing.
So it's quite a variety of different types of satellite data that you're using in this model to detect the mining sites. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So Planet, for instance, is working quite well for when we have a deforestation event, and for instance, our partners in the Park Service want to determine if this is really due to mining or some other cause like a agricultural plot.
And so with Inambari, you're better able to determine that the cause is in fact due to mining as opposed to some other disturbance in the area.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a whole set of tools set up to assist in this sort of monitoring for looking at mining specifically.
And then the partner, Cernamp, is one of the users of this information. They're also working with you, but they're also a user of this information because they are the ones who are responsible for monitoring these areas.
Yeah, that's right. So they were interested in the information we can present on the map for areas of concern. And then we were also comparing that systematically with some drone imagery. So we know what sort of conclusions we can make from our platform.
And so you're still developing that. But anyone through alerts at this point, could anyone take a look at a certain part of the Amazon basin and determine what's going on there? Or is that something that's coming down the road?
Yeah, so at this point, Alerts is an open platform that anyone can log on to and then see all of this whole array of satellite imagery sources, and then also compare the deforestation alerts that we have currently. And in the future, we hope to have something even more specific related to mining specific alerts.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks, Bjorn. And I've got another one here from Dr. Ortiz. And I'm not sure which project this is related to. The question is, does SkyTruth have tools to measure solar irradiance and wind potential in various regions? That would be very helpful for deployment and siting of renewables. I think that's different from what any of the work we're doing now is. John, do you want to address that?
I can just say quickly, no, we do not. You know, it'd be interesting to know what we could conceivably do with satellite imagery. I know Google, for example, has had a big solar potential project for years, using high resolution imagery to assess the solar potential at the rooftop level. And that's a very sophisticated modeling process that other people are doing really well. But if there's an opportunity for us to add anything of value that isn't being addressed by other people's work, we certainly would want to talk about that and explore that.
Okay. And there's a question here. If Christian, if you could clarify something, is the mining reclamation actually improving and restoring habitat? Do you know that yet? And can that be determined from your work? And then I have a follow-up to that as well.
Yeah, so the analysis is really in looking at the ecological performance of these sites. So after mining stops, they do recover. I mean, you're essentially taking bare earth, and then there are efforts to revegetate those. So anything that's planted is some level of recovery. However, what we're interested in is whether that recovery reaches a level that is equivalent to what would be seen at an unmined or undisturbed forest in the region. And for the most part, no, they don't reach that level.
And my follow-up question is, you mentioned that, and I think many of us on this call probably have heard this, that mountaintop mining and coal mining in general are declining in Appalachia. And I'm wondering if you can clarify for us, well, first of all, maybe talk a little bit about your most recent paper and whether we should still be concerned about this beyond the reclamation issue, the actual mining itself.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, mining does continue to happen, and every year we see more land is cleared to accommodate the coal industry. And so our recent work with Defenders of Wildlife was looking at the relationship between the area of land that's been mined and then the aquatic health of streams and rivers, which is of importance for, you know, threatened and imperiled species in those regions. And as long as mining continues to take place, those threats are still going to be there for communities and ecosystems in Appalachia.
Okay, thanks. We also have a question here, which I just lost. Okay, I'm gonna move to another one that is related to something that is in the is in the chat to John Raphael about cerulean and the oil slicks and where you're finding them. There's a question here about most of those slicks seeming to be close to shore, and if you could address that. And what I wanted to add was, can you give us an update on how many images of the ocean cerulean can process each day? And how many oil slicks do we typically see as a result of that?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for the question. We have been finding significant oil pollution from vessels, primarily where vessels go. And so what we find is there are sections of the ocean which are highways where the vessels like to travel in straight lines, because usually it's the shortest distance from point A to point B. If you're out in the open ocean where a vessel never goes, we won't actually see any pollution there. It turns out that most commerce that the world loves to consume is via the ports on the shores. And so we see a lot of traffic between ports to ports. So often these vessels will hug the coast of areas, and we see a high vessel density along coastlines. With regards to the observations that we have specifically, we're limited to the satellite resources that we have available. And right now we're using one particularly powerful free resource called Sentinel-1, which is a group in Europe, produces for free. And what we intend to do is expand cerulean to bring in more and more data sources as they become available, whether that's public or if we find funding to get access to private ones. And then Amy, to your follow-up questions about what sort of rate of images are we looking at, that kind of touches on the same question, which is what are the sources that we're looking at? And the Sentinel imagery that I referred to earlier produces around 3,000 images per day. Of course, we only really care about the ones that are over the ocean for this particular project. And so what we ended up looking at is closer to 1,500 images a day. And of those, we'll find about 20 to 25 images have something of interest that we suspect through human review is potentially oil, whether it's from a vessel or perhaps from an infrastructure, or some natural occurring oils can also appear on satellite imagery. Of course, the idea behind a machine learner is that once you've trained a computer to process this, you can actually create carbon copies of that computer program and run them all at the same time. So if it takes a few seconds or a few minutes to run an algorithm, instead of having to do that serially, one after the other, to process 1,500 images like a human would, you can have 1,500 computers all doing that, starting at the same time and ending a few seconds later. And so the ability to scale to meet the data flow inward is what's really powerful about the machine learning tools of today and the pipelines that can support all of them.
Thanks, Jonna. And so over time, as we get more satellite imagery available, we will be covering more of the ocean, and potentially that means we could see even more slicks out there.
That's the vision, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, right, which is why we're watching, because this is a problem that wasn't being paid attention to until SkyTruth drew some attention to it, other than the poor folks who were experiencing the bad effects on their coastal shores and in their waters. We're running out of time, and I want to respect everyone's time. So I'm going to wrap up the questions for now. If we did not get to your question, you can always reach us at hello@skytruth.org. And I do encourage everybody to sign up on our website, skytruth.org, for the blog. Our blog comes out, it's not going to inundate your inbox. It comes out one every week or every 2 weeks, and you can stay up to date on all of these projects. You can also follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And I am going to turn it over to John now to wrap things up and say goodbye.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, team, for these excellent presentations. And thank you all for joining us. I am really grateful that in this very busy season, in this unusually stressful year, that you could all manage to carve out some time to join us. So thank you a lot for that. And I do hope you'll follow the work of our team in 2022, and don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any questions. So again, thanks. I hope you all have a great evening, and hope we'll see you again soon.